She laughed. Of course I'm talking to other guys. I'm not going to limit myself when you're not even my best option. So I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and left. Now she's alone, unemployed, and telling everyone it was just a joke. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. The garlic and rosemary scent from the roasted chicken filled our apartment, a smell I'd always associated with contentment. I'd gotten home early, tidied up the living room, and even put the wine she liked in the fridge to chill. It was a Tuesday, but Tuesdays could be special if you decided they were. Sarah had been stressed lately. Her new marketing job was a pressure cooker, and I figured she could use a soft landing. I was draining the pasta when I heard her key in the lock. In here, I called out. She dropped her bag by the door with a heavy thud. God, what a day. My boss is a literal demon spawned in a spreadsheet. Hopefully a well-seasoned one, I said, nodding toward the chicken. Dinner's almost ready. I got that Pinot Grigio you like. She offered a tired smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're a saint, Alex. Seriously. She flopped onto a stool at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone immediately. The blue light washed over her face, highlighting the fatigue. This was our rhythm. I was the anchor, she was the kite. I liked being the anchor. I liked building a home for us, a place of quiet consistency amidst the chaos of her world. I remembered missing my best friend's bachelor party weekend to help her paint this very apartment, my clothes speckled with morning mist gray. She'd kissed my cheek and said, "This is ours. We're building something real." I believed her. We ate, and the conversation was light. She vented about work. I listened. I told her about the new project management software my company was adopting. She half listened. It was normal. It was us. Or so I thought. Her phone, sitting face up next to her plate, buzzed. Then buzzed again. And again. A rapid-fire sequence of notifications that made her glance down, a flicker of something, alertness, crossing her face. Popular tonight, I said, taking a sip of water. It's just the group chat from work. It's a nightmare, she said, not looking up from her food. A few minutes later, it buzzed again, this time with a distinct, melodic triplet I didn't recognize. A notification banner slid across the top of the screen. I wasn't trying to snoop, but my eyes, scanning from her face to the salt shaker, caught it. Hinge, Jacob, so when do I get to see that smile in person? The words hung in the air, pixelated and vile. The world didn't slow down. It just got very, very sharp. The sound of my knife against the plate was deafening. Sarah, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I reached over and tapped her phone screen. What's this? She looked down. I watched the journey of emotions on her face. First, surprise. Then, not guilt. Never guilt. It was annoyance. She clicked her tongue, picking up the phone as if I'd inconvenienced her. God, Alex, don't be creepy. Reading my notifications. I didn't have to read it. It's right there. From Hinge. The word felt foreign and toxic in my mouth. Since when are you on Hinge? She sighed, a long-suffering, theatrical sound. She placed the phone face down, but made no move to explain it away. She just looked at me, a challenge in her eyes. The cozy domestic bubble we'd been in had popped, and the cold air of a different reality was rushing in. I thought we were exclusive, I said, the statement feeling foolish and naive the moment it left my lips. I'm not on any apps. I'm not talking to anyone else. And then she laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh or a nervous one. It was a short, derisive burst of air, condescending and sharp as a razor. It was the laugh you'd give a child who just asked if magic was real. Well, that's your choice, isn't it? She said, her voice dripping with a smugness that made my stomach turn. Of course I'm talking to other guys. I have to keep my options open. I just stared, my mind unable to process the casual cruelty. She leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with a sense of superiority. Look, it's just the modern world, Alex. It's naive not to. I'm not going to limit myself when you're not even my best option. The words landed not like a punch, but like a surgeon's knife, precise and devastating. Not even my best option. The meals cooked, the apartment painted, the late-night reassurances, the planned future. It all crumbled to dust under the weight of that one phrase. She kept talking, her voice calm and didactic, as if explaining a simple concept to a slow student. It's about maximizing happiness. You're comfortable. You're safe. But I'm waiting for extraordinary. Why would I put all my eggs in one basket when it's just a middle-of-the-road basket? Each word was another twist of the knife. She wasn't angry or defensive. She was stating what she saw as obvious fact. I was a placeholder, a convenient, comfortable stop on her way to something better. I looked at her, at the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd built a life with, and I saw a stranger. And in that moment, something in me broke cleanly, and a profound, chilling calm washed over me. The emotion drained from my face. The confusion, the hurt, the betrayal, it all just shut off. I placed my napkin neatly on the table, and I stood up. I stood up. The wooden legs of my chair scraped softly against the floorboards, a mundane sound in the wake of the nuclear silence that had fallen between us. I didn't look at her. My eyes were fixed on a point past her head, on the morning mist gray wall we'd painted together. It looked different now, the color of ash. Where are you going? Sarah's voice was a mix of annoyance and disbelief. Don't be so dramatic. We're just talking. Her words were tiny, insignificant noises. They bounced off the new, cold shell that had formed around me. I walked out of the kitchen, my steps measured and sure, not fleeing, but proceeding. I moved down the short hallway to the coat closet, my movements automatic. I reached inside and pulled out my jacket, a simple, worn leather one she'd always said made me look reliable. I heard her stool scrape back. Alex, come on. Stop this. You're overreacting. I slid one arm into a sleeve, then the other. The familiar weight of the leather settled on my shoulders. I turned and walked back towards the front door, passing the kitchen entrance. She was standing there now, arms crossed, her expression shifting from irritation to a flicker of confusion. The script was wrong. I was supposed to be yelling, or crying, or begging for an explanation. My silence was a variable her calculus couldn't account for. I reached for the doorknob. Alex, her voice sharpened. We are not done talking. My hand paused on the cool metal. I turned my head just enough to see her from my periphery. I didn't meet her eyes. No, I said, my voice flat, devoid of the tremor she must have expected. It was the tone you'd used to state the time. We're done talking. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool hallway of our apartment building. I pulled the door closed behind me. There was no slam, no final, dramatic punctuation, just the soft, precise click of the latch engaging. It was the most definitive sound I had ever heard. I didn't take the elevator. I walked down the 3 flights of stairs, my footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell. My mind wasn't racing. It was blank, a pristine white whiteboard wiped clean of the future we'd drawn on it. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I was leaving. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the brightly lit parking lot of a 24-hour supermarket. The fluorescent lights were antiseptic, bleaching the world of color and emotion. I walked inside, the automatic doors swooshing open. I grabbed a basket. I moved through the aisles with a detached focus. Toothbrush, toothpaste, a phone charger, because mine was still plugged into the wall next to the bed I would never sleep in again. A pack of boxer briefs, a single plain t-shirt, deodorant. It was like assembling a survival kit for a trip I never planned to take. Each item was a brick in the wall between my old life and whatever came next. At the checkout, the cashier gave me a tired smile. Find everything all right? Yes, I said. Thank you. My voice sounded normal. It was the most bizarre thing of all. I drove to the first mid-range hotel I saw off the highway. The lobby was quiet, beige, and anonymous. A young man at the front desk looked up. Help you. A room for one. For one night. King or 2 queens. King is fine. The transaction was swift, impersonal. I paid with my card. My card. Not the joint account we used for groceries. My key card was a light, plastic square that granted me access to a temporary, neutral space. Room 214. The room was exactly what I needed, devoid of history. Beige walls, a generic landscape painting, a desk, a bed. I placed my supermarket bag on the desk. I took off my jacket and hung it in the empty closet. I sat on the edge of the bed. The silence was absolute. And in that silence, the pain arrived. But it wasn't a sharp, screaming pain. It was a deep, profound ache of dissolution. The us I had known, the future I had meticulously built in my mind, the house, the kids, the growing old, it hadn't just ended. It had been revealed as a fiction. I hadn't lost a partner. I'd lost the character I thought she was playing in my life. The betrayal was less about her talking to other men and more about the annihilation of my reality. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the quiet, sterile room and let the new truth settle over me. I was no one's anchor. I was just a man in a hotel room. I pulled out my phone. The screen was dark, no notifications from her. Not yet. She was probably still in our apartment, annoyed, thinking I'd cool off and come back, ready to accept my place as the middle-of-the-road basket. I opened my banking app first. I navigated to the joint savings account, the one we'd labeled Future. With a few taps, I transferred exactly 50% of the balance into my personal account. It wasn't an act of vengeance. It was simple arithmetic. Our shared future was a denominator of 0. Then, I opened my social media. I didn't scroll. I went directly to her profile and clicked block. Then I went to my phone's settings and blocked her number. The process was clinical, like removing a malignant growth. I plugged in the new charger. I brushed my teeth with the new toothbrush at the bathroom sink, watching myself in the mirror. The man looking back was pale, but his eyes were clear. He was a man who had just walked away from a lie. I lay down on the king-sized bed, in the center of it, claiming the space. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was mine. It was the sound of a story ending, and the blank, empty page of the next one waiting to be written. And for the first time that night, I took a full, deep breath. The silence lasted 14 days. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a productive one. I rented a small, furnished apartment on the other side of the city. I unpacked my supermarket survival kit and the 2 suitcases I'd retrieved from the old apartment during a carefully coordinated time I knew Sarah would be at work. The place was a blank slate, beige walls, a functional kitchen, a view of a brick wall. It was perfect. It was mine. I went to work. I came home. I started running again, the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement a meditation that cleared the last of the static from my head. The pain had subsided, replaced by a steady, low hum of clarity. I was rebuilding the engine of my life, and I was doing it with my own tools, according to my own blueprint. Then, on a Tuesday evening, a morbid anniversary, my phone, face down on the coffee table, vibrated. Not a call, a text. I finished the paragraph of the book I was reading, marked my page, and then picked up the phone. Sarah, are you really still ignoring me? It was a joke, you know. You take everything so seriously. I read the words. A joke. The condescending laugh, the clinical dissection of my inadequacies, the nuclear demolition of our relationship, all reframed as a punchline I was too dense to get. There was no apology, only annoyance that I was disrupting her narrative by refusing to play my part. I felt nothing. Not anger, not vindication. It was like reading a weather report for a country I'd never visit. I didn't block the new number. I didn't reply. I simply placed the phone back on the table and returned to my book. The message was a fossil, evidence of a creature that no longer existed in my ecosystem. A week later, my friend Mark called. Mark was a mutual friend, but his loyalty had always been first to the truth. Dude, you alive? He asked, his voice cautious. I'm good, Mark. Really? Okay, because, I'm hearing some things from Sarah. I stayed silent, letting him fill the space. She's telling everyone you had a meltdown. That you ghosted her over a misunderstood joke. She's playing the victim pretty hard. I'm sure she is, I said, my voice neutral. But that's not the whole story, is it? Mark probed gently. The story is over, Mark. I've moved on to a new book. He was quiet for a moment. Well, the plot of her new book isn't going so well. She got fired. I didn't say anything. Yeah, Mark continued, sensing my lack of surprise. Apparently, she completely bombed a huge client presentation. Went in unprepared, got flustered by their questions, and just cracked. Her boss said it was unprofessional and indicative of a fundamental lack of diligence. Harsh. I looked out my window at the brick wall. I remembered the countless nights I'd sat with her at our kitchen table, poring over her slides. I'd play the devil's advocate, asking the tough questions she'd never considered. I'd calm her pre-presentation jitters, talking her down from ledges of anxiety she built for herself. I'd proofread every important email, every report, catching the subtle errors that could derail a professional image. I'd been her editor, her coach, her emotional flak jacket. I thought I was being a good partner. I never realized I was a critical, unpaid support staff. She couldn't handle the pressure without you, man, Mark said, echoing my thoughts. She told me she didn't have her usual safety net. I guess that was you. I guess it was, I said, the statement a simple, factual epitaph for a duty I never knew I'd been assigned. After I got off the phone with Mark, the text began in earnest. The annoyed, dismissive tone was gone, replaced by a rising tide of panic. Sarah, new number, I'm sorry. It was a stupid thing to say. I was stressed. You were always my best option. I was just scared. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. You were always my best option. The words were a direct countermand to her cruel, clear statement from the kitchen. She wasn't apologizing for her actions. She was apologizing for the consequences. I didn't reply. The next day, another message. This one had no pretense of emotional reconciliation. It was a naked plea for the utility I provided. Sarah, new number, they fired me. I can't pay rent. I need you. 3 sentences that laid her entire value system bare. She didn't miss me. She missed the stability, the financial contribution, the emotional labor. She was a CEO whose entire infrastructure had collapsed after firing her most dedicated employee. I read the message as I was tying my running shoes. I finished the double knot, stood up, and went for my run. Her desperation was not my burden. Her rent was not my problem. The middle-of-the-road basket had rolled away, and she was finally realizing it had been carrying all her eggs. 3 months to the day after I walked out, I was sitting in a corner of the daily grind, a coffee shop I'd come to think of as my office. The smell of roasted beans and the soft murmur of conversation were a balm. I was sketching designs for a custom desk on a napkin, a side project that was starting to feel like a new career path. The piece was hard-won and absolute. A shadow fell over my table. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The energy was a frantic, discordant vibration against my calm. Alex. I finished a line on my sketch and slowly set my pencil down. I looked up. Sarah stood there, clutching the strap of her purse like a lifeline. She looked diminished. The sharp, polished confidence she'd always worn was gone, replaced by a frayed exhaustion. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore no makeup. She looked like a stranger wearing Sarah's skin. Can I sit? She asked, her voice small. I gave a slight, indifferent nod towards the empty chair. She slid into it, her movements jerky. She didn't speak for a moment, just stared at me as if I were a ghost. You have no idea what I've been through, she finally whispered, her eyes welling up with practiced tears. I lost my job. I'm about to lose the apartment. Everyone thinks I'm a joke. I said nothing. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. The silence stretched, thin and tight, forcing her to fill it. Aren't you going to say anything? She asked, her voice cracking. I said I'm sorry. It was just a joke. You were supposed to be the nice guy. This isn't you. The mask was slipping. The desperation was curdling into anger because her usual tools, tears, accusations, rewriting history, weren't working. I was an unresponsive console. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I felt a final, quiet click deep inside, like the last tumbler in a lock falling into place. There was no hatred, no resentment. There was nothing at all. You were right, I said, my voice even and calm, devoid of any emotion she was trying to provoke. She blinked, confused. What? That night? You were absolutely right. I held her gaze. I wasn't your best option. I see that now. A flicker of hope ignited in her eyes. She misread my calm for capitulation. So you understand? It was a mistake. I cut her off, not with anger, but with the gentle finality of a judge delivering a verdict. And you know what? It was the most valuable lesson anyone has ever given me. I took another sip of my coffee, the picture of casual composure. So, thank you. I continued, a faint, genuine smile touching my lips for the first time. Because of that, I found a much better option. Myself. The hope in her eyes died, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. And my new life, I said, my tone dropping to something soft yet utterly unyielding, doesn't have a place for you in it. It's not personal. You're just not a good option. The mirror I held up was flawless. I had reflected her own logic, her own transactional worldview, back at her. She was faced with the incontestable truth of her own words. and there was no argument she could make that wouldn't condemn herself. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The anger, the pleas, the manipulations, they all withered in the face of my absolute, unshakable indifference. She was a salesperson who had come to pitch a product I had already tested, found defective, and discarded. I stood up, folded my napkin sketch, and tucked it into my pocket. I picked up my coffee cup and my jacket. "Good luck with everything," I said. It wasn't a wish for her success or failure. It was a statement of irrelevance, the same thing you'd say to a stranger on the bus. I walked out of the coffee shop, the bell on the door chiming softly behind me. The sun was warm on my face. I didn't look back. I knew she was still sitting there, trapped in the wreckage of choices she had been so smug about, finally understanding that the one thing she could never manipulate back was someone who had simply and completely moved on. I was free, and her silence was the proof. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Share it in the comments.